set up for this disparate amount of materials. And that's the one thing that the agency is aware of, manufacturers are aware of, and we're trying to make sure that that we're all leaning into this challenge. Industry, government, local governments as well, nonprofits that are already out there performing these functions for manufacturers for other materials. So we have some ways to go still.
Just want to give you all a heads up. We just started recording the meeting. A couple folks who couldn't attend asked if we could record it.
I'll be on my best behavior.
Okay, thanks, Pam.
Do you see any potential headwinds that could cause this to go back to the legislature for another, bite of the apple, perhaps trying to change the implementation or change what has already been passed? Have you gotten any inkling of that yet?
It got brought up on the call we had with lobbyists and with industry.
Only by one person.
Yeah,
we would always bring it up.
By one of the lobbyists who suggested that, there's a lot of confusion around how would the participation rate be tracked, given that participation is really measured on a multitude of materials that are not covered. John Fay, for example, collects paint. John Malter knows that mercury light bulbs come in sometimes at events, and those are covered by other programs. And that person that may have brought that one item is considered a participant. How do you differentiate between an HHW covered household hazardous product participant and a mercury bulb program participant? I'm not interested in letting the perfect be the enemy of the good here. And we explained that currently the state is at a roughly 7 to 8% participation rate. The goal initially by statute is 5%. So this is really not a problem at the moment, in our opinion. We told them that the state does not intend to be looking program by program for participation rates. We would be looking at a statewide participation rate like we do with every other EPR program. I will tell all SWMEs right now, we look to all of you for quality in the services you provide through the MMP and the SWIP process, and the state will continue to look for that and demand that so that we have good services for the people of Vermont and equitable services. But that's the materials management side of how we regulate swimming activities. The HHW EPR program will look at it on a statewide basis.
So what if an organization doesn't come forward? If nobody steps forward to come around and take, like, to your point, pain care, they were all set to do this, and now there isn't anybody. Is it possible that they're just going to say, nobody wants to do this, so we're not stepping up?
I mean, it is possible, Pam. It would be really unfortunate for industry, retailers, the state, SWMEs, everybody involved. First of all, a stop sale would be, at least, it's something that it wouldn't be immediately explored because we wouldn't have a collection plan in place. That's when the stop sale goes into effect.
Okay.
But
we have
an enforcement authority over manufacturers for not participating. What we do right now when a battery manufacturer doesn't participate is we send them a notice of alleged violation. They then have a period of time to get into the participate in that stewardship organization, and they can face fines regardless of them joining. They can still face fines for their time not as non-participant, and we have successfully gotten those fines before. It's not a common occurrence, but it does happen. And I think it would be unfortunate for manufacturers who sell paint thinner into the state of Vermont to not, to know that they're all in violation.
Right.
And that's also too
So
why
there
we're
is a
starting
mechanism.
conversations early, Pam, with the manufacturers, and they are required to register by January 1st, 2025 too. So that's another kind of stopgap of when we're connecting with them and making sure. So if no one registered, that would be an opportunity right there too.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's plenty of milestones in place.
I think so. I think this is still a challenge. I'm not going to say that it's not. It's the first of its kind. So when you go first, you have these challenges. We got the law, and now we have to figure out how to implement it. We should go to Josh Esty. He has his hands up.
Just two quick things. One is I couldn't really follow why there was concern from a PRO perspective as to whether we were counting participation by a single material, because aren't they benefiting if we're counting people that are bringing just paint or just light bulbs? Wouldn't that buoy their participation rate and make it easier for them? So I didn't really understand that line of concern.
Go ahead. Agreed, Josh. Yep, you're cutting out a bit, but no, I agree. And that maybe just be a little bit of confusion on understanding that section of the law, since it's also new.
And I've already forgotten my second thing, but I'll put my hand back up when I remember it.
All right. I mean, in response to your comment there, what happened at the legislature when industry was not in favor of the bill was it trying to explain the confusion as a strategy, that it's too confusing of a law to implement. And so that's basically the same argument that was put up yesterday, or not yesterday, when we met with them. That the participation rate is also nebulous and confusing, and maybe we should make some changes. So John, I wouldn't put it past industry not to try for changes. And I think, we know there's a need. We know this material matters. We know that we have a 30-year history really with municipalities doing this work for decades. And it's not unreasonable, as we know, with toxic materials, to bring industry into the room to be part of the solutions for the material. And that's simply what this law does, just like mercury bulbs, just like our history with paint, just like our history with batteries. So
thank you.
Josh Esty, is your hand back up?
It is back up. I was curious to see all of the number of players that Paint Care had in the room, and I was curious to know if you all had some thoughts as to why they had such a large contingent, and 3 attorneys from American Coatings Association, and whether you thought that was potentially because they were interested in maybe pursuing this as another program that they'd be interested in taking on.
We don't directly know, Josh, but yeah, definitely a possibility that any of those stewardship organizations or trade associations, might be interested in setting up another stewardship organization.
And to be fair, I mean, we're trying to strike as open a position as possible with any association, industry, producer responsibility or stewardship organization out there that wants to learn about this new law and ways they might be able to consider participating, so that everybody hears from the same opportunities for learning as you are today. I mean, this is our municipal group, but we've tried to let everyone in who wanted to participate and just tell them that there might be needs to manage who can talk when, but that wasn't an issue. So I think Mia and I had a call with Product Care out of Canada, because they're one of the only known product stewardship organizations that already does this type of work. And they explained to us their history, and they said all of these players know them, have had interactions with them before, including Paint Care and the cleaning products industry. They are pretty strapped for their existing programs. They're pretty straight out with the number of employees they have to implement existing and ongoing programs that they're adding as provinces add new laws and follow laws of other provinces, British Columbia being one of the leaders in Canada. So they don't really have a lot of time to come to these events, but they said everybody knows who they are. So I think you're seeing who's potentially interested, and maybe that's a representation of how many people they send. That's about all I know.
Yeah, and as Josh said earlier, just to with the FAQ and the covered products list, as you have time to review those, please send Shannon any questions or comments that come up. And hopefully they won't make your head hurt too much as you look at them. But yeah, that stuff is really helpful. The questions we get are helpful in figuring this out and implementing.
So do you want us to send this out to our towns to get comments, or would you rather just keep this kind of internal at this point?
I mean, it's public, Pam, but it might be confusing to send out to your towns. You know, I mean, that's your call. I don't mean to hide it at all, but it might just generate more confusion. You know, you might want to distill and explain to them, or however, you know, again,
I think they're most interested in the timeline. That's really, you know, probably what they're looking at, and the rest of it, they'll get it at some point. But I think that's more along the lines of what they were looking at, is to your point, when's the money coming in?
Yeah, and for you all, you know, what products really are covered.
Yes.
It's not everything you're currently collecting. It's, you know, it's the products, the categories of products that we listed on here. And highlighting, this will come up at the Hazardous Waste Network meeting in a few weeks, but I just want to mention it too. The pesticide program, your bleach product type cleaning products, those are actually fall under the pesticide because they're microbial, antibacterial, etc., antifungal. And I'm not sure how many folks are aware of that, but that's something that Stephanie from Ag is going to come and explain to everybody too, that those could actually be under the pesticide program for reimbursement.
So I didn't know that, and we definitely have not been getting reimbursed for these.
Yep. Yeah, and we figured that out as we were going through. Shannon and I were looking at the list of what was registered as a Class C pesticide because we wanted to make sure, because all that stuff is exempt from the HHW EPR law, and that's when we realized. So, yeah, and they are going to come. Like I said, Stephanie will be at the Hazardous Waste Network meeting to go over that in more detail.
Yeah, so I think we're at an early stage, but I think it's important for SWMEs and your constituents, your towns, to be moderately paying attention to a few things. And I say moderately because it's a new law and you should know the basics. When is it likely to actually be boots on the ground? That's what the timeline is. And then the FAQ and the covered products are definitely interesting to just start to understand. Most of these documents are written for industry because the initial lift is for industry to pilot it up. But then what's going to happen is if we get an industry stewardship organization, there'll be a whole host of other questions as there's a negotiation going on what the rebate is, who's going to be coming with the truck. Do they hire one organization to go around to everybody? It's like that all will be a whole other part of this rollout, right? But I want to get back to, I think it is important for you all to at least look at the covered products and especially to go to the website for the Class Cs. There is 200 pages, and I constantly say this twice because it makes me understand how many are in there. 200 pages of registered cleaning products under Class C and other pesticide-like products. Those are all exempt from the law. 100% exempt. If they're registered, they are exempt as the law reads right now. I am just letting you know that is it. So that's on you to take a look at and understand. And then Josh Esty, I think you have a question.
Yeah, my hand is back up. I just wanted to throw it out there I'm glad you brought the pesticides up because our first quarter pesticide reimbursement wiped out 50% of our yearly pesticide grant number. So Josh, I know you and I talked about this in a separate meeting about whether or not we're going to move that. We're going to start requesting bleach as a pesticide reimbursement in a separate drum. And if we had done that for the first quarter, we would probably wiped out 3/4 of our annual grant reimbursement from ag. And so this is not for a discussion here. It's for a discussion with the Department of Ag, but Mia, maybe that can be something that Stephanie can potentially be prepared to speak to or acknowledge
Yep.
that is a problem at the HHW network meeting? Because I know her and I forget the other gentleman that we were dealing with,
Steve.
but Steve, yeah. I know they promised that they would try to find additional money, and especially if this is not going to be covered, and they want us to request reimbursement for bleach and these other 200 pages worth of materials because they're part of their program, then it's going to be pretty quick that we're going to be submitting our next year's grant applications. And if it's anything like this year's, it's not going to come close to covering it again.
Yeah. And I think it's worth just saying that those conversations really have to be between the districts and the Agency of Agriculture. We did let our Agency of Ag partners know that this part of statute was a large umbrella of materials we were not anticipating would be considered exempt from the law. And probably for the cleaning products group, the industry, they may also have not been aware that they might be exempt. Agency of Ag did not seem bothered by that, and so it's proceeding as it was passed. I will say that the law as it was written really ties it to it being a hazardous waste, but for who generated it. And so some of them,
pesticide registration doesn't tie it to hazardous waste. Sorry to cut you off.
right,
Yeah.
right. But if the things that we don't think of commonly, so even if Class Cs were in the law, like say they weren't exempt, not all of them would be, not all cleaning products, as we talked with Josh Esty about, are actually hazardous waste. And that is confusing.
Yeah, I know. It's but yeah.
But for right now, it doesn't matter because they're all exempt.
Yeah, because they're registered under pesticides, and that's
Yeah.
where you should focus that conversation. And again, Stephanie's coming to the Hazardous Waste Network meeting to address this. And then I imagine, you all might want to have the direct maybe meeting with Agency of Ag directly after that too. But
Go to Scott. Scott, Grim Lines.
Hey, thanks for putting this together. I'm just thinking, as we're a couple years out, it feels like there's no way that this is going to come together, and it's not very complicated from an individual staff on the ground kind of level and perspective. And already the whole HHW system is sort of complicated to manage, but it seems like, especially like I said, with 200 different exempt products, and we're going to have to still dispose of various things that may or may not be covered, under the EPR law, and sort of trying to keep those separate, like in our own facilities. It just seems to add an additional level of complexity that I wonder if there's some way to
I just
about,
want to caution that you may not
training staff and reimbursing
staff.
staff maybe or for that or whatnot. But I don't know if there are additional ways that A&R might be able to help us be able to staff appropriately to address that complexity.
Yeah, I just want to say we may not have that complexity, Scott. It's still really early on, and there's a lot we need to figure out, with the system, and we need to, once we have direct stewardship organization working with, get them directly connected to you folks, get them to see some of your facilities, get them to understand how your events work. And we went through these growing pains with paint care. I know, yes, it was simpler in that there wasn't as many products, but there needs to be an understanding of the system first. And so I would caution us from starting to say we're going to have to separate, and there's going to need to be, 25 different barrels and et cetera, et cetera. I think there's ways we can figure out to make this work. Maybe something like audits could be done to be looking at various materials. There's different ways to do some tracking. I'm more hopeful, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That you all have a really good system in place, and I think there's ways to educate the manufacturers about that.
Yeah, and Scott, I hear the concern, and it is a complex field, and totally get it. I wanted to mention that this law is very explicit on the cost that the industry must cover, and the agency will be the ultimate reviewer of the collection plan to see if it's sufficient for these costs, but it includes facility costs, equipment costs, labor, supplies, maintenance, event costs, event contractor costs, including event setup fees, environmental service fees, insurance fees, shipping containers, and materials. I just wanted to read that out of statute because it's one of the most clear of the EPR laws to say what they have to cover. And then the question will be, yeah, maybe pro rata of costs, getting potentially an understanding of what these costs are with whoever the contractor or contractors are. Those things are kind of remain to be seen, but I think we have to go through the process before we understand if there's bottlenecks, choke points, issues, concerns, that kind of thing. So cautious optimism, but let's see how we go. John Walter, or actually Pam, you're up. You're number one. Let me go.
I just want to go back to the pesticides. I just submitted for my first reimbursement, and apparently I was out to lunch on the conversations with Department of Ag. I did not realize that they were going to be paying for part of the setup fees. So when I submitted my invoice, I got a response back saying, you know, you can actually submit for this portion of it. So I did, but then what ended up happening is I'm 90% done. So I have like hardly anything left for the spring collection. And unfortunately, our spring collection is usually the big collection for pesticides. And then the other thing, which has nothing to do with that, is Annie not working for the Department of Ag anymore?
Annie retired.
Oh, she did. Oh, I didn't know. Okay, okay. All right, that is my only comment.
Yeah, I did ask Agency of Ag if there's been a replacement. They didn't know and they didn't get back to me. So I think the answer is no. Stephanie Smith is our contact, as best I know, and she will remain that contact for all of you unless somebody else tells you otherwise.
Yeah, she's the one who ended up responding. I got a return email address on Annie undeliverable, so Stephanie ended up picking it up. And she was very fast about processing it, I will say.
Great. Go ahead, John.
Okay, I think what I'm hearing from everybody as far as planning for our next round of negotiations with the Agency of Agriculture for the pesticides is that if there are 200 pages of registered materials, we all need to be better educated as to what could be included and what we should be telling the folks at agriculture we need to be getting reimbursed for. Because I think we are collectively leaving a lot on the table through lack of knowledge or awareness for the negotiations. It's one thing to have a full knowledge and submit everything and they just don't have enough money. But if we know that if we're more knowledgeable of what's out there, we can at least start with that negotiation and say, come on, we're having to pay for this. Let's make sure we're getting a fair share of it.
Well, and figuring out how to get our hazardous waste invoices to reflect this. I mean, when you're looking at it now, you can just scan, you look for pesticides and you can submit it. But if we're going through and trying to pull out like pool cleaners and, you know, other things, we'd have to have a different conversation with our contractors about how to invoice.
Well, things like pool cleaner oxidizers. I mean, those kind of things are considered to be pesticides. And I just don't know how much of that we're missing.
Yeah, and I think this is a good opportunity to discuss some of the challenges and how government at the state and local level can work with industry to get the big lift achieved. The big lift is getting a stewardship organization formed that will be collecting from you all and remitting for your costs, right, for covered devices. To get between there and here, you know, for years we've talked about SWMEs collaborating on HHW contractor solicitations, right? And it's difficult because if you get to somebody first, then your weekends are covered and you're good with the state's not going to come chasing you, right? So Like, I get it. It's a super challenge. But I want to at least bring to the forefront that the opportunity to collaborate is still not lost. There still may be reasons to do that, because if municipalities have good services and good network of providers that they're showing the stewardship organization that forms, here's who we use, here's what we do, here's how we can help you, and here's how you can help fund us in an economical way. It kind of floats all boats. And maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but hey, there's worse things. So I've tried to strike with industry a collaborative approach with all of these EPR programs, and I'm hopeful that working with you all, we can do the same. I don't know if that means, a regional HHW, a bid is going out by several SWMEs, or if there's a coordinated SWME RFP for contractors. But I've told them ad nauseum that Vermont is different because we have such strong local government connection here. And you're not going to be finding this difficult to lift because you already have collection in place, e.g. through all of you.
Do you have an idea, Josh, of a location, a site where the registered pesticides are located that we could just go to? And
Yeah, it's also, John, if you go to those documents, the covered products and the FAQ, there's links to the pesticide, the Vermont Ag website right on there that has the whole list for you.
Okay.
And again, Stephanie's going to come to the Hazardous Waste Network meeting and go through that with you all too. So
super.
Yeah, so I think you want to attend the House Network meeting, and if Josh Esty wants to talk, or anybody is, thinking about talking to Jen, but also there's many people here who participate in the district managers meetings. Those might be meetings where you bring up, hey, we might want to chat with the Agency of Agriculture if you so wish. I'm just putting it out there.
Super. Thanks.
Yeah.
What day is the Hazardous Waste Network meeting? I don't have that on my calendar.
I closed my Outlook to not interfere. I think it's December 7th, but I'll look it up and I'll send it out to you all.
Thank you, Mia.
You bet.
Chat.
Yeah, I just.
Yeah, the 7th,
Link
7th? Okay, great. Thanks, John.
12:30.
12:30.
11 a.m. to 12:30?
11 to 12:30.
11 to 12:30. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, Esther Fishman. You have questions, I think.
No, I tuned in late and I think I missed a lot of the important stuff. Sorry.
Well, I'll give you the short version.
Yeah, no, I mean, the short version is, Esther, when you can, look at the FAQ and the covered products list. And if any questions or comments come up, please send those to us directly to Shannon. She's collecting them all. Questions are helpful as we figure this out. We were just discussing pesticides because pesticides are exempt from the household waste EPR law. And in looking at that list of what is exempt, we discovered that many of the bleach cleaners and pool chemicals, spa chemicals that you all collect, oxidizers, are actually covered under the pesticide registration. And so there's a lot of discussion going on about that and having a separate conversation with Agency of Ag, who is coming to our Hazardous Waste Network meeting December 7th to go over that.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, and then the other main highlight is that, really implementation is not going to happen until somewhere in probably mid 2026. And that's when you would start to see moving towards implementation of a program plan. Right now, we're in the really early stages of connecting with the manufacturers.
So where are the FAQs?
I sent them out in the email I sent for this, and they're posted on our website, and I can resend it to everybody after the meeting again.
Yeah, you can go, and for Mark Shea, who just joined us, if you want to get to any of the resources, go vtrecycles.com, click on special recycling, and then you go into HHW. If you're familiar with the special recycling, Karen helped set that up with Mia in collaboration several years ago. And we've added HHW EPR to that list of special recycling EPR programs. Now, obviously, HHW is not really recycled generally, but this is the term we're using right now. We may.
It's our product stewardship page, basically. So that's why, yeah.
And if you ever forget where to find anything, just go to BT Recycles and the search function is really great. Just put in HHW EPR and the page will come up.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
I did put it in the chat as well.
Thanks, Shannon.
It's there.
So I was talking a little earlier about SWMEs collaborating for an RFP for a HHW contractor or contractors. You can imagine if you had a set of contractors that you were always talking to, you could also say, gee, have you pulled out this data on what we collected in the last 2 years? Or could you sideline that data so I know what materials are coming in? And with this issue of Class C pesticides, that there may be more reason to do that in the future. But again, I'm going to leave that to you all to look into, and we've given you the resources and the connections to that exhaustive list that's on the agency's website. So. Other questions or comments?
We have another meeting with the manufacturers coming up in a few weeks. And then we'll also continue to meet with you all. And then as things start to kind of funnel, we'll bring everyone together. We've been having 2 separate processes so that it's not to overwhelm. It was like the other day when we met with the manufacturers, there was probably 30 or 35 people on the call. So just to let you know, we're having both of these conversations at the same time and being transparent with everyone. And we'll bring everybody together at some point.
Yep. And we can have another one of these meetings really
Yeah.
whenever. This is not difficult for us. We're happy to meet with you all and share what we know. I think it's important for us to keep sharing what we know, but as the milestones, there's not a lot of action for a little while. We've kind of given you all the most current action. That's why those documents are on draft. I do expect the FAQ will continually be updated as we get new questions and new things going, and covered products as well. Probably this is a space where it'll continually evolve as we know products on the shelves evolve quite a bit. I am heartened by some conversation I had with someone, and I'm forgetting where it was, that industry is seeking to reduce the toxicity of their products and has been for years. That doesn't mean that we're still not using some nasty stuff, but I think this is another reason industry will start paying attention to the toxicity of what they're putting out there.
Any other thoughts pop up for folks?
I guess lastly, we have to report to the legislature, which is in the top of the timeline. The agency has to recommend a fee. We're working on a brief memo on that through leadership here, and we will submit it in January. I don't see any issues with us submitting that. There may be some comment from the legislature in response to what they believe our fee should be. And then I expect something will be put into the law for an agency oversight fee. Probably doesn't impact you all very much in the least, but it's something we're looking at because it's important for us to get support for our oversight and administration of programs like this. Otherwise, we'll continue with the compliance provisions we have to enforce the law, and also we'll be continuing the open conversations we have to make sure people are aware first and foremost and educated on what it is, what's required, and when it's required. And really, the industry is the first person who needs to take action to form a stewardship organization and get the data collection plan in a timely fashion. So that's where we're at.
Definitely where we are right now. All right. Like you all already had your turkey. You're so quiet and sleepy. I'm just kidding. I appreciate that. We appreciate the time. And as stuff comes up, please reach out. And we will stay in touch too.
Thanks for your work on this.
Thank you all.
We're
Appreciate it.
excited to be doing it. Yeah.
Happy
Yeah,
Turkey
thank you.
Day.
Yep, happy
Bye, everyone.
Thanksgiving, take care,
Have a good holiday.
too.
everybody.
bye-bye.